President Trump told Axios that Iran is choking like a stuffed pig. Those were his exact words. He argued the naval blockade is proving more powerful than the bombing campaign. He said Iran is being squeezed harder than any country in modern history. Then, in that same news cycle, Iran's Joint Military Command released a statement that deserves just as much attention. Not for its tone, but for its structure. It said Iran's armed forces have their hands on the trigger. It said that at the slightest mistake by the enemy, full force would follow. And it did not name a single condition under which that trigger would not be pulled. Put those two statements side by side. The President of the United States says Iran is suffocating. Iran's top military authority says its finger is on the trigger. No qualifiers, no boundaries. Both statements are official. Both are on the record. Both cannot fully describe the same reality at the same time. A country that is truly choking usually tells you what would make the pressure stop. A country issuing an unconditional military warning is not behaving like one on the verge of collapse. Oil is at $116 a barrel. Germany's chancellor has publicly said the United States lacks a convincing negotiating strategy and is being humiliated by Iran. And China has said absolutely nothing. Not about Trump's stuffed pig line, not about the IRGC's trigger warning, not about Germany's verdict. 0 words. Most coverage treats these as separate developments. Trump's rhetoric on one side, Iran's military messaging on the other. But they aren't separate. They are one signal. And the signal isn't about whether Iran is choking. It's about what it means when a country removes the off switch from its military warning at the exact moment its adversary declares it's suffocating. Over the past 60 days, every Iranian military warning contained a condition. We will respond if you bomb. We will retaliate if you seize ships. We will close Hormuz if strikes resume. Each one defined a boundary. Each one preserved a diplomatic exit ramp. This time, there was no boundary. Just, the trigger is loaded. So here's the question that matters. How does a country under the most intense economic and military pressure in modern American history issue a threat without naming what would stop it? The answer is one word: China. Not China as a mediator. China as an economic foundation. A country that needs the pressure lifted tells you how to lift it. A country whose oil exports are running at 1.84 million barrels per day, higher than before the war, through China's shadow fleet, doesn't need the pressure relieved. It can endure it. And when you can endure pressure indefinitely, you don't have to tell your adversary how to stop the escalation. The absence of conditions is confirmation that China's system is working. Call it the unconditioned warning. And once you understand what that means, you start reading every Iranian statement differently. Look at the 4 signals that arrive together. First, the military statement itself. Hands on the trigger. Slightest mistake. Full force. No condition attached. Warnings are normal in conflict. The pattern that matters is whether they define a line. Past IRGC warnings defined lines. This one didn't. A conditioned warning says, avoid this, and escalation can be prevented. An unconditioned warning says, escalation is no longer framed as avoidable. Second, Parliament's declaration on Hormuz, not a proposal, not leverage, an order from the leadership. In Iran's system, the leadership means the Supreme Leader's Office and the IRGC command, the unelected power centers above the president and foreign ministry. When Parliament invokes that phrase on a military decision, it signals the choice has already been made at the top. That's not a bargaining chip. That's a directive. The diplomatic wing cannot soften it because it didn't issue it. Third, the forced unity statement. President Pezeshkian and Parliament Speaker Ghalibaf posted identical language on the same day. We are all revolutionaries. The moderate versus hardliner distinction disappeared overnight. Washington's strategy has always assumed a negotiable faction exists inside Iran, one that can deliver commitments if terms are right. The synchronized messaging tells America that the internal distinction it's been targeting may not exist in a meaningful way right now. One, Iran, revolutionary, issuing a military warning with no off switch. Fourth, timing. All of this landed as Trump spoke with Putin and Moscow announced it had nuclear proposals for Iran. Iran knows Russia is offering an alternative channel on the nuclear issue, one that doesn't require concessions to Washington. Publicly hardening while privately exploring a Russian exit route is not contradiction. It's dual-track strategy, strength outward, options inward. China is watching both tracks, and China has seen this pattern before. The closest historical parallel isn't Vietnam or the Cold War. It's 1941, when the US imposed a total oil embargo on Japan. The assumption was clear: cut off 80% of its fuel supply, and Japan will negotiate. Pressure would win without war. Japan appeared to negotiate. Delegations met. Proposals moved. Diplomacy was visible. But inwardly, Japan was redirecting its economy toward military production, securing alternative resources, and preparing for self-sufficiency. And Japan never named the condition that would end the crisis. It negotiated without offering an off switch. On the day of the attack, its ambassador was still delivering diplomatic messages in Washington. I'm not saying Iran is about to launch a Pearl Harbor-style strike. I am saying that, historically, when a country stops attaching conditions to its military warnings, it signals an internal calculation has shifted. The threat becomes less about deterrence and more about description. Look at Iran's inward moves. It halted its petrochemical export sector, $13 billion annually, redirecting output inward. It secured food and medical supply chains against continued blockade. CNN's satellite imagery showed underground military facilities being cleared and reinforced during the ceasefire window. That's not the posture of a country waiting for relief. That's the posture of a country preparing for endurance. Meanwhile, diplomacy continues. Foreign Minister Araghchi met mediators in Islamabad. Iran submitted a revised offer within 10 minutes of Trump canceling a Pakistan trip, an offer Trump called much better. Progress in earlier talks was real. So yes, diplomacy is active, but there's a critical change. Ali Bagheri, who spent 21 hours in negotiations in Islamabad and nearly reached a memorandum of understanding, is out. Saeed Jalili is in. Jalili publicly opposed the 2015 nuclear deal. He ran for president on rejecting concessions. His appointment isn't cosmetic. It defines the boundary of yes. Araghchi can attend meetings. Jalili sets the floor, and that floor does not include nuclear concessions, the primary U.S. objective. Now, to Steelman the counter-argument. Maybe the unconditioned warning is domestic theater. No Iranian leader can appear weak while tankers are turned back, and Trump uses language like stuffed pig. Perhaps the unity statement masks internal division rather than eliminating it. Maybe Jalili signals minimum acceptable terms, not the end of talks. Each of those explanations works, individually. But what they can't explain is the simultaneity. Military warning without condition, permanent Hormuz order from leadership, forced unity erasing moderates. Hardline negotiator appointed, all within the same week. 4 domestic performances don't synchronize by accident. Timing is a signal. Watch 3 things next. First, does the IRGC reintroduce a condition in its next statement? If a warning says, "We will act unless X happens by Y date," the off switch is back. If not, the message remains unconditional. Second, what did Iran's much better revised offer contain? If it included any nuclear flexibility on enrichment timelines, third-party custody, or its 440 kilograms of enriched uranium, that would show public hardening alongside private flexibility, 2 tracks still running. If not, the tracks may have merged into a single hardline path. Third, China. China has enabled the economic architecture of this conflict. The Dark Fleet, Yuan transactions, Security Council vetoes, diplomatic engagement. and China has said nothing about Iran's unconditioned warning. When partners issue alarming military rhetoric, concerned allies usually call for restraint. Silence, in this context, is precise. If China speaks, it means something surprised Beijing. If China remains silent, it likely means Beijing already calculated the trajectory and prepared for it with 1.2 billion barrels of strategic reserve. So ask yourself, Iran warned that fire could start at any moment. It named no condition to prevent it. China said nothing. Which of those facts tells you the most about where this conflict is heading? China already has an answer, and that answer does not sound like a ceasefire.